Good morning. I'm going to be reading to you again from Scope, the binge watching edition. If you turn it again, you'll see that it is volume 68 and number 6. And if you would please go with me to page 4, I will be reading to you. And at the end, I will try and go through and define the vocabulary. Last time I recorded this, it said it was too long, and so I am playing with this to see if I can get it to do better. But I hope you all are doing well today. And I'll keep reading to you. At the top of 5, it says, after a 13-year-old football player suffered a life-altering brain injury, he and his family dedicated their lives to making youth sports safer for everyone. And as we read, let's think about what young athletes should know about concussions. October 12, 2006 was crisp and clear in Seattle, Washington, a perfect day for football. Parents chatted in the stands as two middle school teams faced off on the field. As always, 13-year-old Zachary Lestat was a star player on his Tahoma Junior High team. He had already made 2 big tackles that afternoon, helping put Tahoma in the lead. Late in the game's first half, Zach tackled a runner rushing toward the end zone. As both boys tumbled to the ground, Zach's head smacked against the turf. The other player quickly scrambled to his feet. Zach did not. Zach lay on his back, clutching his helmet and writhing in pain. His coach ran to him while his fellow players took a knee and waited for their fallen teammate to get up. Seconds ticked by. The crowd remained silent. Finally, Zach sat up. Cheers erupted from the stands as Zach stood and walked slowly off the field. His teammate slapped his back. Zach sat down to rest, and the game went on. Football as usual. But something unusual was happening inside Zach's brain. Zach had suffered a concussion, a kind of brain injury. When his head hit the ground, his brain shook violently against the inside of his skull. Sitting on the bench with his teammates, Zach seemed okay, but billions of cells in his brain had been injured by the impact. Playing through pain. Today, some 2.8 million kids in the United States play football. For many of them, football is more than a fun and exhilarating game. It's a way to build discipline and character. It can also be a way to pay for college, and for the lucky few, a ticket to some of the best schools in America. But over the past decade, America's favorite sport has come under intense scrutiny for the high rate of brain injuries among players of all ages. From the dawn of football in the late 1800s until very recently, knocks to the head were considered just another part of the game. Tough guys played through the pain. After a hit to the head, many returned to the field with blurred vision, aching temples, and stumbling steps. Toughing it out was seen as a sign of strength and loyalty to teammates. Over the years, this attitude trickled down to even the youngest players. Zach had grown up watching some of his favorite football stars treat their heads like battering rams, colliding with their opponents with ferocious force. Popular video games like Madden NFL showed players staggering along the field with serious head injuries. Sportscasters ran highlight reels that celebrated the most brutal hits of the week in college and professional football. So it's easy to see why, less than 15 minutes after his injury, Zach decided his team needed him. As happens to many players, Zach didn't realize he had suffered a serious brain injury. He didn't know that by returning to the game, he was risking brain damage or even death. A ticking time bomb. Zach's coach looked him over. A concussion, also known as a mild traumatic brain injury, or mild TBI, is an invisible injury. It leaves no outward marks. Without special training, even some doctors can't detect one. So when Zach said he felt fine, his coach did what many coaches did when a star player said he felt well enough to play. He sent Zach back to the field. Zach played like a champion. Through the second half of the game, he sprinted, blocked, and made key tackles. Meanwhile, his injured brain was ticking like a bomb. Each small hit and jolt pushed his brain toward disaster. In the game's final seconds, Zach raced after the other team's running back. He crashed into him, forcing a fumble. It was a game-winning play for Zach's team, but there would be no celebrating. Barely a minute later, Zach collapsed. His brain was bleeding and swelling, pushing against his skull. The pain was blinding. Zach drifted in and out of consciousness. With his frantic parents and coach by his side, he was airlifted to a hospital where surgeons worked feverishly to save his life. They removed large sections of his skull to relieve pressure. But that night, Zach was in a coma. It would be 3 months before he opened his eyes, 9 months before he could utter a word, and nearly 2 years before he could eat on his own. He would need care for the rest of his life. Second, impact injuries. It's shocking to think that a friendly middle school football game ended with a healthy young player in a coma. And indeed, only a very small percentage of kids who play football sustain life-threatening brain injuries like Zach's. Concussions, however, are more frequent. About 10% of middle school boys who play football sustain concussions during games, according to the American Journal of Sports Medicine. Most people who get concussions will recover with proper treatment. Untreated concussions, though, can cause constant headaches, memory problems, mood swings, and other issues, which can last for days, months, and even years. In Zach's case, it was not the initial concussion that caused his brain to bleed and swell. It was those second, third, and fourth small knocks to his head that happened after he went back into the game. In other words, if Zach had sat on that bench, gone home, and stayed off the field until his brain had healed, he would likely have been able to keep playing football in high school. What if? During those first weeks while Zach lay in the hospital, the words, "what if," haunted his parents. What if Zach had understood the dangers of concussions? What if his coach had been trained to recognize them? What if there had been a rule in place to ensure the injured players didn't return to the game? It's the hardest part of this, knowing that what happened to Zach could have been prevented, Zach's father, Victor, has said. As the Listats focused on helping their son recover, they became determined to prevent other athletes from suffering Zach's fate. Working with lawmakers and the doctors who treated Zach's injury, they helped develop the Lestat law. This law prohibits young athletes who are suspected of having a concussion from returning to play without approval from a medical professional. Since 2014, the Lestat law or similar laws have been passed in all 50 states. The National Football League became a major supporter of the Lestat law. The NFL has also passed tougher rules about concussions. Today, it's against NFL rules to tackle head first, and doing so comes with stiff penalties. Players who get hit to the head are immediately evaluated. The NFL isn't the only organization paying attention either. In 2012, Pop Warner, the nation's largest youth football league, implemented special training programs and new safety rules. It now limits tackling drills during practice. Tackling is closely linked with concussions. Many youth football teams have done the same. Some teams, especially those with younger players, have eliminated tackling altogether. A new version of Madden NFL was created too. No longer are injured players glamorized. The makers of the video game say they now see it as an important educational tool for kids' safety in sports. These are encouraging steps, but most experts agree that concussions are still a cause for concern in youth sports, especially in contact sports like football and soccer. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 69% of teen athletes return to play despite having concussion symptoms. This is a problem that Zach and his family are working to change. The road to recovery. It's been almost 14 years since Zach's injury, and his recovery has been long and difficult. In addition to relearning how to speak and eat, Zach spent most of high school in a wheelchair, doing 30 to 40 hours of physical therapy every week, working with the same gritty strength that made him a star on the field. Today, Zach can walk with the assistance of a cane. "There's no one tougher than my son," Zach's father said. Sometimes players and parents wrongly believe that it shows strength and courage to play injured. Strength is seeing Zach stand up out of his wheelchair and learn to talk again. Zach and his family remain advocates for safety in youth sports. Their work has helped change the way many players and coaches, parents, and fans think. Zach also travels around the country spreading the word about the dangers of concussions. Everywhere he goes, his message is the same: no game is more important than your life. Let's go to the top of 8 and look at the facts. What to know about concussions. Concussions are not a problem just in football. It's important to understand what they are and how to stay safe. The numbers: 1.9 million of children ages 5 to 18 are treated for concussion every year. 47% are sports related. 3 months is the average time to fully recover from a concussion. Symptoms of a concussion: headache, confusion, forgetfulness, dizziness or trouble keeping your balance, nausea, vomiting, blurry or double vision, grogginess, and a sensitivity to light or noise. The rates: concussion rates are highest in contact sports such as tackle football and soccer, but concussions can happen in any sport. And what to do if you might have a concussion: tell an adult. Tell your parents, tell your coach, stop all physical activity, and rest until you are evaluated by a doctor. Let's flip back now to page 7 and look at brain disease in professional football. This is current research. Athletes can suffer permanent brain damage from repeated hits to the head. Dozens of retired NFL players have been diagnosed with a brain disease called CTE. This disease is linked to head impacts they suffered over the many years that they played football. In 2017, researchers studied the brains of 202 former football players who had donated their brains to science. Of those, 87% had CTE. The NFL has donated millions of dollars to brain research. It has also instituted stricter rules to protect players. In January 2019, the NFL reported that concussion rates had fallen 29% from the previous year. And that concludes our reading. And I'm going to define some of the words that were in bold. A coma is a state of unconsciousness caused by damage to the brain from an injury or sickness. We saw the word feverishly. It means having or showing the symptoms of a fever or involving intense emotion or activity. Frantic, it's an adjective. It means wild with fear, worry, or extreme emotion, or done in a hurried, nervous, and wild way. Glamorize is to make it appear glamorous and more exciting or attractive than it truly is. Implement is to put something into effect or practice. Initial means occurring first or at the beginning. Scrutiny was used, and that's the act of carefully examining or inspecting something for faults or mistakes. Sustain is to support something to keep it going. And the last word is traumatic. Something that's traumatic is so upsetting and shocking that it may lead to serious mental or emotional problems. You will be given a worksheet after this. Please do both the front and the back and do your best. Thank you and have a good day.